Good evening, and welcome to Stories Forged in Fire. They say when the fire comes, everything ends. But sometimes, if you're small enough, and quiet enough, and lucky enough, you slip through. Gilda always knew where the mirrors led. That's how I got here. I don't think this place is heaven, and I don't think it's hell either. It feels like an in-between hallway, like the ones in the house that changed when I blinked. I'm not scared anymore. Not like I was. But I still remember. I remember the nursery. I remember the song that made the walls cry. I remember the man with the blue fire. And if you're listening, I'll tell you what happened. Not so you'll come find me, but so you don't forget that I was here. If I think hard enough, I can still remember the day we arrived. The carriage trundled along the winding Asterson lanes. A small tallow-pane porthole beside my seat gave me a narrow, flickering view of the city. The day of Boundary and Flame had just ended, and the streets bore proof of the revelry. Discarded wax stubs, spent incense, bits of ribbon trampled into the stone. Through the warped glass, I watched distorted shapes placing refuse into wicker bins. The driver's voice cut through the stillness. "Plaza of the First Being, just ahead." I pressed Gilda to the window so she could see. The statue of Father Brain stood there, garlanded with laurels and purity seals, towering like he was still trying to protect something. And then, I swear, Gilda twitched. Just a tiny shift in her fabric, like a flinch, or maybe I imagined it. I was good at imagining. My parents sat across from me in silence, the kind of silence that had worn grooves in their voices. I started to wonder if they were speaking telepathically. I wished they'd just say something. With every quiet moment, I watched the space between them grow. Not physically, but in some deeper way, like the carriage itself was stretching to hold the weight of all the things they didn't say. If they had found their way back to each other, maybe things would have ended differently. Maybe in another life, they did. After what felt like cycles, we arrived. It wasn't the slowing of the carriage or the coachmaster's hollering that signaled our approach. I felt it, in the tightening of my gut, the way gravity sometimes picks you out, just you, and gives your belly a little tug, like it knows something you don't. I shifted my legs. Mother and Father only stared out the windows, into some alternate future they still hadn't let go of, or perhaps a life they thought they deserved. I heard a whisper. Was it Gilda? No. The carriage jolted to a stop. The coachmaster crooned, "Final destination, please depart." He sounded almost happy about it, like he'd dropped off cargo instead of people. We gathered our meager belongings. In the argument that came before the move, heated, half-whispered, and full of sharp pauses, my parents had decided we would travel light. The man who sold Father the house, or rather, the phonograph missive that arrived unbidden one morning, declared in its skipping, crooning tone that the property was fully furnished with all modern commodities, wired and waxed for comfort, blessed against mildew and spectral recurrence, a fine dwelling for any God-fearing family of good standing. Standing. The needle had caught on the word standing. It repeated itself 3 times. I think that was the part Father liked most. I packed everything precious to me in the tapestry bag Mother made me. She'd found the cloth in the gutter, stamped with purity seals encrusted in wax slag. She'd cleaned it like a lost child, patched the holes, threaded the saints back into their faces. That's when she saw it, Saint Mina, my namesake. She was the mother prioress who gave her left breast in the ritual that created the first waxbound. The stain never came out, but she said that meant the bag remembered. And there we stood, silent, small, as if we'd arrived not at a home, but at a verdict. Behind, the carriage pulled away, slow, reluctant, its wheels crunching over hardened wax slag. Even the torch spirit powering it seemed hesitant to leave, sputtering like a candle, unsure if it should go out. We stood still, bags in hand, the 3 of us drawn upward, as if some unseen hand placed a finger beneath our chins and gently lifted. Look. That's what it felt like the house was saying. Witness me. And we did. I didn't know it at the time, but it was watching us, too. We were not its first offering, just its latest. The facade stretched skyward, too grand for the likes of us. A stone and wrought iron manse, massive and still, as if it had once been built for someone greater. A heavy brass gate stood at the edge of the street, flanked by black iron fencing whose posts tapered to needle points, not to keep people safe, but to keep something out. Beyond the bars, a garden struggled to remember what it used to be. Hedge sculptures lined the path, overgrown and half erased. My imagination tells me one was a gargoyle once, its wings now curled into itself, the shape lost to time or disuse. The rest of the garden was much the same, unkempt, wistful, like it had once been loved and then politely abandoned. With some work, I thought, maybe Mother and Father could bring it back. How had Father secured such a place? He was a tallyman for the tithe masters, not the lowliest position in the ecclesiarchy, but far from the grandest. Still, wax bread found its way to our table, and we survived to tithe another day. Mother spoke then, the first words I'd heard from her in what felt like ages. "Why don't you and Gilda go find your new room and get settled in? Your father and I have some unpacking to do." I almost didn't recognize her voice. It startled me from my reverie. I dropped Gilda. I snatched her up the moment she hit the ground, clutching her to my chest like a confession. Letting her fall had felt like a betrayal. I made a vow in that moment, silent, sacred. I would never let go of Gilda again. Father said nothing. He just kept staring at the front door, as if something on the other side was staring back. And looking back, considering everything that's happened since, I can say now, without a shadow of a doubt, something was. I was the first to approach. They busied themselves with luggage and mutterings, while I stepped alone toward the threshold. With each step along the soot-stained, slag-crusted stone path, gravity deepened. My legs grew heavier, as if the house itself was testing me, asking quietly, "Do you really want to come inside?" At last, I reached the front steps. I clutched Gilda tighter to my chest and dared a glance over my shoulder. Mother was chastising Father for forgetting her favorite blouse. He said nothing, just bent low and shouldered more of her burden. When he stood, he followed after me, slow and silent, like a man accepting a sentence. I continued my march up the front steps, and finally to the great double doors that sealed the entrance. Each was adorned with a heavy brass knocker, gripped in the cast-iron teeth of a three-headed beast. Even in stillness, the creature seemed to tremble, with rage, or hunger, or both. Instinct bade me to reach out, and so I did. One hand clutched Gilda to my chest, the other extended slowly toward the snarling ring, expecting the cold bite of brass, crusted with verdigris. But I never made contact. Father brushed past, abrupt and silent, and with his only unburdened limb, he kicked the door open near its base. The wood groaned, then gave. The house inhaled. The foyer yawned before us. I steeled myself and took a step across the threshold. The air shifted. My stomach dropped, and I sweared on my mother's consecrated sewing needle. Gilda twitched again, but I hardly noticed it. I was in awe of what I beheld. The foyer was lavishly furnished by our standards. 2 worn, prayer velvet chairs sat adjacent to a small table, a decanter at its center. The contents within had long since run dry. Beyond that, a blackened hearth was set into the wall, its gaping mouth like that of some insatiable creature. It made me uneasy to stare at it too long, so I didn't. Instead, my gaze drifted to the next curiosity. To one side of the hearth, a battered phonograph sat atop a carved waxen pedestal, like a scruffy butler doing his best with what little his bankrupt lord has left him. The stone floor around it was littered with candle stubs, scattered in various states of usability. I can't say why, but I felt pulled toward it, so I stepped forward, and a most curious thing happened. I heard, not music, but conversation. Hellos and goodbyes, sobbing, laughter, like the phonograph hadn't merely played for each occasion, but kept them, trapped them. The closer I crept, the louder it became, layer upon layer of overlapping voices pressing against each other like forgotten house guests. Gilda shuddered. So did I. I took a step back. The voices vanished. To the right of the hearth, half shrouded in linen, sat a curious piece of furniture, oval-shaped, its cloth clinging like old skin. A mirror? I considered checking, but then Mother crossed the threshold. She looked around with an expression halfway between judgment and resignation, then muttered as she set her bag down. Not as dreadful as I feared, but it smells like something gave up in here. She wasn't wrong. I had been so entranced by the artifacts scattered around the room that I hadn't noticed it at first. The stench, not foul, not overpowering, but wrong. It didn't quite sting the nose like rot or mildew. It pressed behind the nose, like a memory you can't quite place. It wasn't organic. The only way I can describe it is spiritual. Like something surrendered in here. Not a person, but a soul. Something that curled up in the corner long ago and simply stopped trying. Looking back now, I wouldn't rule it out. Not with what I've seen since. "Mina, dear," Mother said, looking down at me with that tired, clipped tone she used when trying to sound patient. "I thought I instructed you to find your room. At what point did I say, touch every cursed object in the house before the paracleric arrives to purge the haunt?" I blinked, stunned. Could she feel it too? Or was she just blustering, like always? But Mother, the man in the missive said, blessed against mildew and spectral recurrence. She crouched beside me then, face close. I could smell her breath, linen warm and sour, and feel the heat still clinging to her skin from outside. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Sweetheart, she said, brushing a strand of hair from my cheek. Never trust a man. Then came the kiss, a quick press of her lips to my forehead. Not affection, but punctuation. A period on the sentence of her irritation. Now go, she said, rising. Find your room, and don't touch anything until your father and I have had a chance to look around. I nodded and turned to take stock of the place. Beyond the foyer stretched a vast hall. At its center rose a grand staircase, wide and regal, draped in a crimson runner that bled down the steps like a wound. Halfway up, it split in two, one stair curling left, the other right, spiraling toward an upper gallery ringed with carved balustrades. It looked like something out of a play, the kind where no one survives the third act. I climbed. The stairs groaned beneath my feet, not with age, but with attention, like the house had noticed me. At the landing, where the stair split left and right, I paused. Curiosity pulled me toward the balustrade. I turned back, meaning to glance down at the foyer, to see Mother still milling about, maybe scolding Father over a misplaced satchel. But the room below had changed. What should have been the entryway now stretched into a vast dining hall, long and cathedral-like. A single banquet table ran the length of it, draped in lace and tarnished silverware, with every seat set for a feast. Only one chair sat slightly askew, as if someone had just risen to greet me. A goblet tipped over and rolled across the table's surface, clattering off the edge. I blinked. The clatter echoed too long. When I looked again, the foyer had returned. Just a moment of misseeing, I told myself. Just a trick of tired eyes and thick air. But Gilda felt heavier in my arms, and I didn't believe my own excuse. Still, I turned right, toward the landing, and pressed on. A balustrade ran the length of the upper floor. To my left, doors lined the walls like enforcer automatons on parade day, silent, still, and watching everything. I didn't know where they led. I never checked. They made me uneasy. As I passed one, I heard a low moan, then scratching, slow and deliberate. Had an animal wandered in while the house was vacant? Poor thing. I reached for the handle, but a voice in my mind, small, sharp, whispered, "No." Not angry, just afraid, like it had nothing left but warning. Gilda burned in my arms. Not metaphor, not memory. She burned. Hot enough I thought she might catch, but then, just as quickly, the heat faded. I yanked my hand away from the door, trembling. "Okay," I whispered. "We won't open that one." To make sure, I pulled a bright red thread from my tapestry bag and tied it around the handle like a warning bell. We would remember this one. The hallway curved just slightly near the end, like the house didn't want me seeing too far ahead at once. That's when I saw it. A door, slightly ajar, marked with a wax seal half melted, like someone tried to bless it and change their mind. I nudged it open with my shoulder, Gilda cradled tight in my arms. It was a nursery. Dust hung in the air like breath held too long. A cradle sat near the window, draped in cobwebs and an old prayer cloth. Toys lay scattered across the floor, some too old for any child I could imagine. A music box rested on a shelf, open but silent. Its spindle spun slowly, like it was trying to remember the song. I didn't step inside, not yet, but my eyes caught something on the desk. A journal. Small, leather-bound, faded initials pressed into the front. L.H. I opened it. The handwriting was blocky and uneven. A child's. "Papa brought something home from the tithe engine. He said it followed him, but it doesn't bark or whine. It just stares. I named him Nibbles because he tried to eat my glove. Nibbles doesn't have fur like normal dogs, just a little patch on his head. He likes when I pet it. It calms him down. Today, Nibbles got lost. I think he's in the walls. Sometimes I hear him crying. I think he's hungry." The final page had been torn out. I stood there, quiet as a statue, the book open in my hand, and for the first time since entering the house, I realized I wasn't just in it. I was part of it now. I set the book down, gently, and cursed myself for disobeying Mother. Even if it was accidental, the guilt clung like a cobweb, but the feeling slipped away when I caught movement in the corner of the room. A small, tallow-pane window let in the last of the day's amber light, distorted by soot and age. The beam landed on a rocking chair, slowly shifting back and forth, as if someone had been comforting a child, or never stopped. I stared too long. My eyes began to water. I blinked and looked away. It had to be Mother and Father, shaking the house, moving furniture. That's what I told myself. But I heard no footsteps, no voices, no sound at all. I wiped my eyes and crossed to the door. The hall still waited beyond it. The balustrade, the staircase, the red runner like a bleeding tongue, all just as I left them. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe the house was just old. I stepped into the hall, and the door closed behind me on its own. "Mother?" I called out. My voice felt small. The plush carpet beneath my feet swallowed the sound of my steps, and the walls, they pressed in, as if trying to muffle me entirely. Still, I pressed on. Something was wrong. I reached the bottom of the stairs and turned toward the foyer, only it was still a dining hall, but not the one I'd seen before. The chairs, once neatly aligned, now lay askew, some pushed back, some toppled completely like the guests had all risen at once and fled. I stepped closer. The cutlery had rusted. The plates were dulled and spotted with mold. Wax spinner webs laced every surface like a funeral veil, and beneath them I saw bread, rotted and gray, still waiting on its plate as if time had skipped around it. At the head of the table sat a high-backed chair. A dark stain marred the inside of it, spilling down the fabric like a wound that had tried to hide. It smelled of copper, faint but unmistakable. I didn't dare get any closer. "Mina?" It was Mother. I was sure of it. The voice came from the far end of the dining hall, soft, hesitant, as if calling through a dream she wasn't certain she wanted to return to. It slipped out from behind a door tucked into the corner of the room, the kind of door you don't notice unless you're looking for it. The kind that shouldn't have been there. They say in old Astersan faiths that demons gather in corners. That's why some sanctuaries were built domed, to leave no shadows for them to hide. I wasn't thinking about that then. I was only thinking, Mother found me. Gilda pressed tighter to my ribs, not by my will. I crossed the dining hall without even realizing I'd moved. Each step carried me further from something I'd never returned to, though I couldn't name it then. I reached the door. Its frame looked too thin, too tall, as if the house had grown it overnight, like a splinter pushed out from under rotting skin. I placed my hand on the knob. It was warm. The door gave way at my touch, and I stepped through. A narrow hall awaited, claustrophobic, dust-choked, and lit by a single flickering sconce that made the walls jitter. The wall was immediately in front of me, forcing a choice, left or right. Then I heard it. Wet, squelching, rhythmic, like something feeding with joyless efficiency. The smell came next, hot copper and something beneath it, sour and wrong. I turned the corner. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. There was movement. A crouched figure hunched over something pale on the floor. Its limbs were too long. Its spine rose and fell like a bellows. Black tufts of hair clung to a balding skull matted with filth. One hand, if it was a hand, gripped flesh. The other held it steady, as rows of yellowing teeth tore quietly into soft tissue. Its face was hidden beneath a veil of wax-stained cloth, not wrapped like a bandage, draped, almost reverently. An old anointing shroud, half melted and clinging to the remnants of a forgotten ritual. The wax had run down in jagged yellow trails, like someone had tried to seal the creature's eyes shut, or preserve what was left of its mind. Then it stopped. It turned, slowly, and even though its eyes were bound beneath that waxen veil, I knew it was looking at me. It smiled. "Mina?" it said, in a voice that didn't belong to it. A broken parody of my mother's tone, as if it had swallowed her memory and was tasting it now. Mother forbade us to pick scabs or clip our nails at night. She said the clipping ghoul would find them, that he followed the scent of broken things, skin, blood, pieces of self left behind, and when he gathered enough, he'd come to see what you might be willing to give. Back then, it sounded silly. Now, it felt like a warning I hadn't understood. Maybe he did have a name after all. Maybe it was this. Gilda seared against my chest, and I ran. Down the hall, past the chairs, through the ruins of the dining room. The sound of squelching faded behind me, replaced by the thud of my heartbeat in my ears, and Gilda's warmth pressed like a sun to my ribs. I reached the stairs and I saw him, Father, just ahead. He turned the corner at the top of the stairwell, a silhouette etched in dying light. I called out, but no sound came, only the hush of the house responding in silence. I chased him, took the stairs 2 at a time, but when I reached the landing, he was gone. The house shifted after that. Walls rearranged, doors forgot where they led. I forgot how many days I survived, or how many nights I hid from the clipping ghoul who cried like he missed me, but never came closer when I answered. Eventually, I stopped running. I made my way to the only place that still felt safe, the nursery. Gilda whispered that she'd protect me, that I just needed to sleep. So I crawled into the little bed, pulled the blanket to my chin, and held her close. My eyes grew heavy, something I had thought impossible, like sleep had become a memory I could no longer afford. But in that moment, the warmth of Gilda's spark wrapped around me, soft and steady, like candlelight behind a gauze. I watched from the bed as the door began to close, not with a slam, but with a sigh. It didn't latch, it sealed. This will be my tomb, I thought. But it wasn't. It was a lantern, and Gilda kept it lit until he came. I don't remember how long I slept. Time doesn't move here like it does out there. The house grew quieter, hungrier. It forgot I was inside, or maybe it didn't. Maybe it just waited. Sometimes I think I became the house, or at least part of it. I could feel the walls breathe. I could hear the doors think. I learned when to stay still, when to hide, when to pray. And then one day, a new fire. Not the house's gnawing hunger, not the cold flame of grief, but something hotter, purer, blue. The man with the torch had entered. I guided him, like Gilda once guided me. I kept him safe from nibbles in the pantry. I became the door, the hidden one, and opened for him. I begged him to release us, and he did. With a single breath, he set the foyer ablaze, but it wasn't destruction he brought. It was release. The fire didn't devour. It remembered. I saw it then, what lay beneath the canvas by the hearth. Not a mirror, though it had the shape of one, but a doorway, and beyond it, this place, the webways between. There are other souls here, some with stories, some with wounds so deep they forgot how to speak, but all of them waiting. I saw them again, just once before we parted. Mother, father, the boy who lost nibbles. One by one they passed through the doorway, onto whatever lay beyond. The man with the torch had left the front door open, after all. And me? I stayed behind for a while. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted someone to know, to remember, that I was here, that Gilda kept the light on, that I tried. And maybe if you're small enough, and quiet enough, and lucky enough, you'll find your way out, too. People think hauntings are about anger, about vengeance, but most of the time, they're about being forgotten. We were never the center of the story, just the shadow at its edge. The quiet girl, the crumbling marriage, the house too big and too silent for its own good. When the fire came, they all ran, but I stayed, because no one told me I could leave. I think maybe that's what happens to us, the children who were left behind. We walk the halls not out of malice, but because we still think someone might come looking. But someone did. He carried a blue flame, and for the first time in forever, I wasn't cold. He didn't ask my name. He already knew it. If you're reading this, maybe you feel it too. Maybe you were forgotten in the shuffle, overlooked in the chaos, unseen, unheard, until now. This story is for you, because you were here, and that matters.